welcome to one of the special places in all of motorsports, Monaco, home of round 7 of the Formula One World Championship, as we kick off your big Memorial Day weekend of racing with Thursday practice from the Grand Prix of Monaco. I'm Bob Varsha along with Steve Matchett. As you can see, a huge crowd on hand for this one-time only Thursday practice. It happens only at Monaco. Let's go around the track, Steve.
Well, Monaco is probably one of the most famous race circuits in the world. It's all about downforce on this car. It's a very twisting, turny circuit that goes in and out Monte-Carlo, round the hotels and the harbour. Features the famous tunnel, of course, which is the only circuit, I think, in Formula One that uses a tunnel to this sort of extent. There's the crossover at Suzuka, but nothing like here. It's all about getting downforce on the car and getting grip from the tyres. We'll see the teams using as softest tyres as possible, but the circuit is very, very difficult.
Now to the highlights of the morning hour of practice. A little spring in the step there for Rubens Barrichello, who has had his contract extended an extra year by Ferrari. But here is perhaps the biggest news of the weekend. Look at the front end of the Arrows car. The search for front-end downforce has gone to fairly laughable extremes, Steve.
Well, as we just said, talking about the track map, it's all about getting downforce on the car. That was Arrow's solution to it, to try and get rid of the understeer as well, but very unsightly.
There was a look at what happens when you don't have it, as Tarso Marquez put the Minardi in the walls. There is Giancarlo Fisichella. The Benettons came out, turned one lap, and then parked for virtually the entire session. They got out for a few laps at the end. The hour dominated by Michael Schumacher with a very professional approach. Come out, do a lap, come in, change some things, go back out. At the end of the day, he had set quick time at 1:21. Barrichello, after the controversy of giving up second place on the track in our most recent race at Austria, appears to be back in fine form at Ferrari. Here's a look at the morning session times. Michael Schumacher and defending Monaco champion David Coulthard at the top of the charts. Olivier Panis in 7th, once again comprehensively outperforming his BAR teammate, the 97 world champion, Jacques Villeneuve. Jean Alesi in the Prost, you see, in 10th place. Alesi always very good on the unforgiving streets of the Principality. We expect a big jump in times in the second one-hour session as the track continues to rubber in. After that fairly uneventful morning hour, we'll be back for the second hour of practice preparation for the Grand Prix of Monaco. Stay with us.
Speedvision's coverage of Formula One is sponsored by Bridgestone, a grip on the future.
Welcome back to Monaco. Bob Varsha and Steve Matchett with you. The second hour of Thursday practice is underway. This is Olivier Panis, 7th in the morning hour, coming up to speed in his BAR Honda. Around the swimming pool. The car ratcheting on traction control. This is the Rescas corner, named for that beige-colored restaurant that sits squarely in the middle of it. Onto the broad boulevard, pits off to the left. You can see the BAR squirming around as he dives into Saint-Devote and up Beau Rivage. New debris fencing on the left. Blind left-hander, Casino corner, and now the famed Casino Square. Downhill past the tip-top bar, avoiding the bump on the driver's left, into Mirabeau, and down to the hairpin. Now the Grand Hotel hairpin, formerly the Lowe's, and before that the station hairpin. Sliding the car, this is Poitiers, the door. Site of Ayrton Senna's famed accident when he went into the guardrail while leading the race handily. No sound in the world like a Formula One car going through the tunnel. Now back down at Harborside, heading for Tabac, and what is arguably the toughest part of the racetrack. Blind left-hand turn, then a 130-mile-an-hour approach to these corners at the swimming pool.
And it is all about pinpoint accuracy, Bob, isn't it, Randy? Because there's no runoff areas, the drivers have to be absolutely spot on to get that racing line correct to get a good time out of it. And it means, of course, leaning onto the Armco as well. I remember Nigel Mansell coming out with comments that he actually feels the tyres compressing against the Armco to know that he's got that pinpoint racing line to get a good time out of the car.
To the line, a 1:23.952. That's a couple of tenths off the Frenchman's best this morning. And, of course, Olivier Panis is a former winner here. He had the astonishing upset back in the 90s when he drove for the Ligier team. 1996. I remember seeing the Ligier team at the Nice airport, and they too were absolutely stunned. Now, a moment ago, this was Ralf Schumacher locking up the Williams at Saint-Devote. He has bad memories of that corner.
Yeah, it's a very common fault to lock up going down. That's the end of the start-finish straight before the climb up the hill. And, of course, it was exactly that corner that Ralf Schumacher put the car into the Armco and damaged his leg with the suspension coming out of the car.
That's right. It speared through, got him in the leg. Once again at Rescas, going slowly with the Williams. He lost brakes entirely 2 weeks ago in Austria. Now here comes Juan Pablo Montoya. He will race in Monaco in a Grand Prix car on the first anniversary of his victory 1 year ago at the Indianapolis 500, which of course also takes place this weekend.
Now watch as the car comes round the Grand Hotel hairpin, how tight that corner is. This is a one race in the season where the engineers actually have to develop a tighter suspension system because of the lock that they need on the cars to get round that corner. The suspension, the track rods, would actually foul the inside of the wheel rim, so they have to develop new suspension components to allow them to put that extra lock onto the car.
An interesting situation with regard to the brakes on the Williams, and we'll talk about that later on in the weekend as we bring you live coverage of qualifying and then of course the race itself. Now, moments ago, Giancarlo Fisichella in the Benetton Renault with very few laps this morning moved up to 4th on the timesheets, while Montoya, who was 16th this morning, tries to move up.
Well, Monaco is a circuit really of great leveling. Really, there's no great advantage in having the most powerful power plant in the cars because you just can't use the power. You can't put the thing down.
There's a look at our current order. We'll take a break and return to Monaco. Welcome back to Monaco. Be sure to join us on Saturday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time for live coverage of qualifying for Round 7 of the World Championship, followed by our live race coverage featuring Peter Windsor's pre-race reports beginning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern. On the track at Harborside, this is Michael Schumacher, the current World Championship leader and fastest man in the morning hour session. While we were away, Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren Mercedes turned the quickest time of the weekend thus far, 1 minute 21.380 seconds. Schumacher ahead of that pace, as you see, through the second intermediate sector. At Rescas, Fernando Alonso has his Minardi off the line, bringing out the yellow flag, and that will ruin the German's lap.
And that's half of the problem of races at Monaco, of course, is that because all the corners are so blind, you can arrive on an accident really a split second after it's happened with no comprehension of what you're going to find round the corner.
And not only does Michael Schumacher find out his lap was slowed, but his teammate, meanwhile, Rubens Barrichello, has gone to quick time. And as we watch Fernando Alonso hitting the barrier at Rescas, we should also point out David Coulthard just brushed the wall at Tabac, approaching the swimming pool heavily with the right rear, and he has limped it around to the McLaren pits. Here is Olivier Panis at Saint-Devote sliding up into the cobblestone forecourt of the beautiful church down there at the corner.
Now have a look at this. What we're seeing here is the BAR garages at Monaco, where normally the people were working in F1 would have these pristine operating theatre type conditions. At Monaco, absolutely not. This is all they get. It's a very tight, compacted pit lane. All there is room in the little garages at the back is for the computer racks and the tyres and nothing else. Come rain or shine, they're working out in the open.
It's really difficult to convey the intimacy and at the same time the danger of Monaco. The track is shorter than the international standards, certainly very, very dangerous, but because it is Monaco, Grand Prix racing keeps coming back here. Now, Heinz-Harald Frentzen has just moved up to 3rd on the timesheets in the Jordan Honda. Boy, that team needs a good result like they need oxygen. You see Montoya still down in 18th as we watch Barrichello coming down to Mirabeau. And now down to the hairpin. Like the front straightaway at Indianapolis, or perhaps the same at Monza. One of the most familiar scenes in all of motorsports right there. Now there's Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren pits.
For the teams, it's a plus and minus, of course, working in these conditions because it's very difficult conditions for them to work in. But the engineers get the opportunity to walk up and down the pit lane and look at what everybody else is doing, of course. It's very difficult.
You can't hide anything in Monaco. Here is Jean Alesi, who, as I mentioned earlier, is very good around these streets. He ran very well in the morning session, 10th. He has now been bumped back on the cumulative time sheets to 13th. But he just loves coming to Monaco. Here's Montoya flashing up into Casino Square. Over the bump. Down to Mirabeau, about a 1/10 of a second off of Barrichello's split time through the first intermediate sector.
You start to see the racing line already, Bob, starting to develop as the soft tyres put the rubber down going around this circuit.
What a sound through the tunnel. Now alongside the harbor, lined this weekend with some of the most amazing yachts you will ever see afloat. This is to back where Coulthard apparently hit the wall. Oh, the Colombian is really trying hard as you watch the car twitch. Added a little chrome section to his helmet paint job for the weekend. Remember when Alain Prost used to use that, everyone thought it was cosmetic, but he said it actually helped keep the heat off his head. Up to 6th goes Montoya in the BMW Williams. And that is by far the best lap yet for a Michelin-shod car this weekend. There's Eddie Irvine in the Jaguar, also off at Saint-Devote. A completely new rear aerodynamic package for the Jaguar that the team is desperately hoping will make them more competitive. Another look at the Irishman locking him up and sliding off. Discretion definitely the better part of valor there. We'll be back. Back at Monte-Carlo, on board with Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Let's take a lap of this historic circuit. That is better than any computer game. Heinz-Harald Frentzen does not improve. He remains 3rd quick, which the Jordan team is certainly happy to accept right now. This is Rubens Barrichello on track in the Ferrari through Rescas. We expect a hot lap out of him shortly. His teammate is just behind him on the track, so we'll have both Ferraris in action at the same time here as Barrichello goes on the clock. On board with Frentzen, we got a feeling for the rev range that these engines are subjected to.
Yeah, we are very much such a tight circuit. You know, this circuit more than any is all about driver input, and that onboard that we just saw of Frentzen going around in the Jordan give a classic example of that.
Barrichello quickest thus far through that first intermediate sector.
You know, to a large extent, really, throughout the Monaco weekend, it doesn't really matter what the engineers want to do with the cars, but it's all down to the driver input. It's all down to the accuracy of getting that racing line sorted between the Armco. So it's not unheard of to leave the factories with one setup, try all sorts of different setups throughout the weekend, and on the grid on the Sunday afternoon, go back to what you had in the factory again.
This is along the harbor side, through to back to the piscine, the swimming pool. And now he has slowed down quite a bit. Look at that, 2.6 seconds to the second intermediate. Meanwhile, here is his teammate, Michael Schumacher, who was even quicker still through that second intermediate. He has his teammate on the road ahead of him. Schumacher's contract has been extended by Ferrari through 2004 to the tune of about $38 million a year, and he is earning his money today. Quick time by 75 thousandths of a second. The two Ferraris are at the top of the charts. And that time of 1:20.8, still off of last year's pole lap set by Michael Schumacher, 1:19.4. We'll be back to Monaco. Back at Monaco, or more appropriately, Monte-Carlo. Be sure to join us Sunday night here on Speedvision for Speedvision News Race Week. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have, of course, highlights of the Grand Prix, plus the Indianapolis 500, motorcycles, drag racing, and more. This is Heinz-Harald Frentzen on a cool-down lap now. While we were away, Ralf Schumacher moved up to second place on the timesheet, splitting the Ferraris, while Trulli is now fourth. And there you see the top 8. Jean Alesi right there in the 8th spot. Juan Montoya has been bumped back down to 7th. Eddie Irvine in the newly redesigned Jaguar runs 9th. David Coulthard, after tapping the wall, currently 10th and going backwards. Here is Jacques Villeneuve. Only Graham Hill, Jim Clark, Emerson Fittipaldi, and Mario Andretti hold the distinction of winning both the Grand Prix of Monaco and the Indianapolis 500. Villeneuve is halfway to joining that elite company. Little tire squeal there through Rescas. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the course through Poitiers, this is Jean Alesi. Ooh, and I imagine that's just what it looks like to the drivers from the darkness of the tunnel, bursting into the sunlight at about 170 miles an hour.
It must be absolutely terrifying. The inside of the tunnel is fitted with very large, very bright arc lights, all facing away from the driver, of course, to help with that light change from the artificial light of the tunnel to the real light of sunlight coming back out into the open. But boy, it must shock them for a second.
Currently 8th, obviously on a cool-down lap, looking for a open piece of racetrack perhaps, or perhaps headed to the pits as he passes Rescas. And that restaurant is open during the weekend, by the way. Now let's join him for a lap. Across the line, 2 seconds off Michael Schumacher's current session leading time. Still in 8th spot. Mika Hakkinen ahead of him there on a hot lap. He'll catch up with the Flying Finn through the famed Casino Square.
And really, although Alesi's time wasn't particularly quick, it was off the pace certainly compared to Schumacher's time. That's what he needed, was a clear lap. That makes the difference around here, because you hit any traffic, you cannot get by. You're stuck in traffic. It's game over as far as getting a good lap out of the car is concerned. But Alesi had a pretty clear run at it there.
1998 winner, Mika Hakkinen, along with David Coulthard and Olivier Panis. a one-time winner of this event. Michael Schumacher will be going for his 5th victory on the streets this weekend. If he gets it, he'll still be one short of the late Ayrton Senna's record total of 6. Also Marquez and the European Minardi ahead on the road.
And that's what I'm talking about by being blocked. You know, there's just no way you can get around the thing, really. And if you're wondering where Coulthard is, it's McLaren mechanics are actually in the process of changing the right rear suspension after that knock he had. It's rear track water is bent as well, but what you've got to be very careful of is where the rear tyre makes contact with the Armco, it can push the drive shaft through the gearbox casing, so it can be a lot more involved than what we really think.
Hakkinen up to 5th, but he probably could have had more without that Minardi in the road ahead of him. We'll be back. Back at practice at Monaco, and Mika Hakkinen is flying. As you can see, 1/3 of a second under Michael Schumacher's session-leading time at the second split. This is a continuation of his previous lap in which he jumped up to 5th on the timesheet despite being slightly balked by a car in the road. Across the line he comes and moves into the lead by a full second. That means he made up 0.7 of a second on Michael Schumacher's Ferrari in basically 1/3 of a lap from the second intermediate to the finish line. An astonishing performance. Here's the Ferrari pits. And I mean the entire pit. Hopefully during the course of the weekend we'll get a look at the fire safety technology in the pit lane, which is basically a bunch of water cannons mounted alongside the racetrack pointed at the pit area. If a fire breaks out, everybody, and I mean spectators and everyone, are going to get hosed down.
It looks, I'll tell you, when you're working in the pits, it looks absolutely frightening to see that guy with a cannon pointing the thing down at you.
Of course, he's got all the gear on and the reflective face shield and whatnot. Here is Schumacher into the Ferrari pit.
Well, the pits are so narrow at Monaco that the spare car is not going to be used today, of course. The spare car actually has to be stored on the opposite side, on the racetrack side, in between the computer racks, so the perches where the engineers are watching everything going off. There's just no room at all.
And a part of the spectacle at Monaco every year is the parade of pit crews towing race cars from the paddock area, which is out on the pier, into the pit area for practice, qualifying, and of course the race itself.
Yep, in the morning, absolutely everything, every tool and piece of equipment you need from down on the harbour has to be carried up into the pit lane, and once you're in there, the track is sealed and it's almost impossible to get out. It's such a rigmarole to walk through all the tunnels and whatever to get back to the harbour. You're in there all day, and when the Formula One sessions are finished, wheel everything all the way back down again into the harbour front. It's a nightmare.
This is Ralf Schumacher, currently 3rd, but a full second off the pace, despite the fact that this is the shortest racetrack in Formula One by far. The gaps between cars can be disproportionately large. And I think a lot of that gets back to the courage of the man behind the wheel. Going slowly, you saw the flags waving at the previous corners, down to the hairpin. No one else on track right now. This could be a good opportunity for Schumacher. Ooh, one of the Arrows cars. That's Enrique Bernoldi just getting away with one in front of the Grand Hotel. That's actually the motor entrance. On the left, you see the entrance where the cars, taxis, and whatnot drive in. At the far right, you see where they exit again. There's Jean Alesi in the blue Prost. Meanwhile, back in the pits.
You can see that the guys have got the nose section completely off, and I think what they're doing there is changing torsion bars. I think what they're going to be doing there is taking that suspension out, and they'll be changing spring arrangements on there. The Ferrari has got torsion bars as opposed to coil springs because they work better. There's less friction on them, and they're mounted longitudinally inside the chassis. So very similar to our VW Beetle or an old Citroen Traction Avant would have from the 1937 period. But of course, they're machined out with titanium, of course, and about
exactly what Ferrari wants you to be saying right now. This is Rubens Barrichello in the other Ferrari, currently 4th, 1.1 seconds off the pace. Meanwhile, Jacques Villeneuve has jumped from 11th up to 7th in the BAR Honda. Flashing down the hill course, that grandstand will be full for qualifying and racing. One of the many challenges to spectators here in Monaco is walking to your seat. Around the swimming pool. It's the TV compound to the right of your screen, where all of the world's broadcasters are crowded into a space about the size of your average fast food parking lot. The final corner.
It used to be a terrifying situation. Hanging the pit boards out there as the cars come round Raskas and back onto the start finish straight. As you hang the board out for the driver to see the lap times and his position on the track, the car is aiming straight for you. You have about half a millisecond to hang the board out, and it's terrifying to think of the situation of getting it back before the car drives at the board.
She doesn't look terrified at all. Meanwhile, they continue to work on Michael Schumacher's car.
Now, how about that for a shot? How often do you see that throughout the Formula One season? There's so many covers and screens thrown over the cars normally. Again, at Monaco, there's absolutely nowhere for anybody to hide.
Jarno Trulli in the Jordan on a hot lap. Check the front wing on this car. Look at that thing.
It's very, very ugly.
The constant battle to find front-end downforce. Of course, the Jordan has a long history. A few years ago, they built some absolutely bizarre front-end arrangements, specifically for Monaco.
Well, everybody's trying to get more downforce on the car, of course, and the reason is that average speeds are much slower, and when speeds are slower, there's less aerodynamic effect on the car. So it swings and roundabout situation, really. You can go faster, such as a circuit like Monza or Silverstone example, where the average speed is higher. You can get create the same amount of downforce, but here speeds are low, there's less downforce effect on the car, so you need to put more wing on.
Jordan's not alone in coming up with some pretty creative wings. Remember the old Tyrrell X wings that rose out of the side pods? McLaren put a wing on top of the air box. Anything to get some help when it comes to downforce. There's a good look at it. Convenient place to perch your lunch, I suppose, too.
The reason they started coming up with these bizarre mounting points, of course, for the aerodynamic aids on the car is because the regulations, the FIA have tried desperately to trim the areas, the building regulations, if you like, where we're allowed to build wings, and they thought that they'd trapped the situation off so that the aerodynamic engineers couldn't put wings where they wanted to. Well, really, Jordan's engineers don't want to put that wing there, but the building regulations of the current situation allow it to be fitted there.
Truly 3/10 off the pace through the intermediate, currently in 5th on the time charts. Jarno Trulli has been going very quickly in practice and qualifying of late. He just hasn't been able to get it done on Sunday. And of course, 2 weeks ago in Austria was perhaps the worst. Heinz-Harald Frentzen lost the gearbox, and Trulli had launch control problems as 4 cars were stranded on the grid, making a total of 6 in the last 2 races. We expect to get some input from Peter Windsor this weekend about the problems with launch and traction control that have been plaguing the Grand Prix teams thus far this season.
Well, I'll tell you.
Whoa! Truly sliding it, true karting style through the corner. Across the line he comes. He improves his time, but he remains in 5th spot.
The problem for the engineers as far as traction control and launch control is concerned is they have so little time, track time, to gain the information for which to set the car up.
And things could get worse because all of these odd wings that have sprouted on the cars are getting a close looking over by the technical officials of Formula One, and they may not be there all weekend. We'll have to wait and see. Welcome back to Monaco. Here's the other man besides Jacques Villeneuve with a shot at the Indianapolis 500 Grand Prix of Monaco double. Juan Pablo Montoya flashing through to back in the Williams around the swimming pool. He has some experience of this racetrack, having driven Formula 3000. Finished 6th behind Nick Heidfeld. Oh, he gets sideways and tags the tire wall heavily. Rear wing is gone, and that left rear tire is down. I wonder if that contributed to the spin.
Well, there's certainly a possibility of that. I mean, it was a right rear corner that made contact with a tire barrier, but you can see quite clearly there the left rear rim. So I don't know whether or not there was some problem with that just as he came round the corner. He certainly lost the car well before coming into Raskas.
As you can see, the flaggers and the track marshals are quickly at work. Here's another look. I think he had a puncture.
I believe so. You could see the tire roll off the rim as the car came to a rest. But, yeah, I would say that's a mighty fine bet there, Bob.
Well, Montoya begins his walk home as Kimi Räikkönen and one of the Jordans continue on their way. We'll take another look, and this time listen closely. See if we can learn something. Well, I'm not sure we did, but that gives you some kind of an idea of what it's like when a Grand Prix car comes to a bad end right in front of you at Monaco. Welcome back. About 10 minutes to go in this second one-hour session now, and David Coulthard is on a hot lap in the McLaren Mercedes. He got 20 laps in the morning hour of practice, but very little. This is only his 6th lap in the second hour after tapping the wall at Tabac. He spent a long time in the pits getting the right rear suspension fixed. Currently in 12th spot, but we're at that time in the session when qualifying setups will go on and the times will begin to plummet. We don't know that that's what Coulthard is doing right now, but he is certainly giving it some stick. Around Raskas with traffic ahead of him. There's Ralf Schumacher. And one of the Minardi's. Up to 6th. So Coulthard going very well. Coming off a win 2 weeks ago in Austria. 1.2 seconds off of the quick time.
McLaren mechanics actually did a pretty praisable job there to get that car out, because the changing the entire right rear suspension on one of these cars is pretty involved.
There's a massive grandstand behind this camera position. And it too will be packed on Sunday. Now here's Mika Hakkinen climbing Beau Rivage into that blind left-hander. Very quick in 4th gear. Hold the gear through the square. And plunge down to Mirabeau. 7/10 slow. Chasing his own session leading time.
Yeah, the traction control cut in there on the McLaren Mercedes engine to try and pull some more traction out of it.
And again right there, almost like a rev limiter. Same concept, really.
Pretty much the same concept, yeah.
To the chicane.
Of course, the big talking point as we've had leading up to this race is going to be the launch control situation and how that's going to play out on Sunday afternoon. And as we touched on before, you know, it's the lack of data that the teams have had to work with. If you remember, the launch control system only works for up to 3 seconds at the start of the race before the system kicks over to traction control. So, as far as the electronics engineer is concerned, they've had 2 races using launch control. That's a grand total of 6 seconds of data they've got to work with. You know, okay, they've done countless practice starts, but there's no simulation like a Grand Prix start other than a Grand Prix start itself.
And speaking of starts, in both Spain and Austria, the drivers were allowed to practice their starts at a designated spot near the pit exit. Here in Monaco, the pit lane is so tight they haven't been able to do that, so officials have been allowing the drivers after each of the practice sessions to practice their starts on the racetrack. That caused a huge problem for Michael Schumacher right there when he came around to practice a start, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen had stalled right in front of him with the Jordan.
You know, the reason they need to keep practicing those starts is because the grip level changes at the circuit, and the grip level for each circuit is paramount information for setting the parameters of the launch control. And, of course, you have to remember that the grip will increase at this circuit at Monaco as the weekend goes on. So what you're going to see on Sunday is going to be different from what you're seeing now.
Schumacher improves his time by more than 2/10, but is still second to Mika Hakkinen's terrific effort earlier in this session. And the German continues on his way in the Ferrari. As a look at the current running order, Ralf Schumacher 3rd, Barrichello 4th, Coulthard up into 6th, as we saw a few minutes ago. Juan Montoya 9th, but he is finished. T-cars are not allowed in practice, and he crashed at Rescas. Jenson Button coming to terms with the Benetton Renault after a brutal 1-hour session this morning in which they turned almost no laps at all. They got a handful right at the end of the hour. At the intermediate, still well off the Finns' time to that point. You're looking at a 4-time winner of this race.
We're also looking at an incredibly bumpy racetrack as well. You know, just watching the Ferrari circulate around the swimming pool complex there, coming around the harbour. You can see how the front and rear suspension is taking a pounding. And the reason for that, of course, is because it's a small Mediterranean holiday resort. It's not a racetrack. These are just public roads.
Absolutely. More improvement for Schumacher, but he remains in 2nd spot. Now, just under 7/10 slower than Häkkinen. Drive like that when the slightest misstep could result in serious injury. Just breathtaking to watch. We have about 5 minutes to go in this second 1-hour session of the day. This is Jarno Trulli. That bizarre front wing perched on the car in front of him.
Well, it's a classic example, that, of how the engineers will try and exploit the regulations, be it aerodynamical or electronics, to the absolute maximum they can. And, of course, the situation with launch control is, if anyone's got a problem, will they switch it off? Well, you would expect the teams to take that sort of decision themselves, but, of course, they're all out to get the maximum performance they can. So I don't think you can always rely on the engineers to play to the rules of the game unless they're absolutely rigidly enforced by the FIA.
No improvement for Trulli. 1.4 seconds off of Häkkinen's time. Schumacher on the road ahead of him. Moves aside. You can see where the rubber is being laid down now. As they head into the casino. That's the dome of the casino to the right. Now here's a comparison of Jasper Stappen's arrows on the road here at Monaco. On the left, without that bizarre front tray arrangement. On the right, the bits they've added to try to get downforce at the front of the car.
You see the guys putting fuel in, and where they're putting fuel in, of course, is where on Sunday afternoon they will put the race refueling valve in. But, of course, on the practice sessions, that race refueling valve is removed, and they put that very small, much lower pressure valve on just so they can top the car up for practice runs.
This is Michael Schumacher again. Still turning quick laps. Again, the squeal of the tires. Lots of build-up there through the Anthony Nogue corner, the final corner before the start-finish stretch. Again, he lops time away down to 0.4 of a second off of Häkkinen's time. But Schumacher remains in 2nd spot. And he still is pushing hard. On 3 minutes to go in the session. If in fact Schumacher gets Häkkinen, he will certainly have worked hard to do it. He turned 18 laps in the morning session, and he is now approaching his 30th lap in the afternoon. Oh, around the swimming pool, and he's got one of the Jordans in front of him.
You see how the Ferrari mechanics are so timid at putting that board lower. They'd love to put that board down so the drivers can see it, but of course Schumacher is going straight for it.
He lost a couple of tenths on that lap. Here's David Coulthard now, currently in 6th spot, just over 4 tenths off of his teammates' time to the second intermediate split. He too has a Jordan in front of him on the road. That was Jarno Trulli. Come through the final corner like bicycle riders in a peloton, just snaking through there. And Coulthard remains 6th. 2 minutes to go in the session now. Coulthard eases off. Trulli continues on his way on a hot lap. There you see the order. Hakkinen, the Schumacher brothers, Michael leading, then Rubens Barrichello, Jarno Trulli, David Coulthard, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and Jacques Villeneuve. Juan Montoya remains in the 9th spot. I thought he'd slip back a bit farther since he's not running at this point in the session. Alesi there in 10th, then Fisichella doing very well. His teammate Jenson Button is 17th. And while Eddie Irvine is 12th in the revised Jaguar, Pedro de la Rosa is 22nd. He crashed in this morning's 1-hour session and has turned no laps at all here in the afternoon. Here's Mika Hakkinen. See a pair of ominous streaks going straight on there at Poitiers into the wall. That was Pedro de la Rosa's accident scene, and here's Ralf Schumacher into the tire wall. Not sure exactly where this is. Down at the swimming pool. On the exit. The quick right and left-handers to exit the swimming pool. Oh, and there's bits of race car all the way up the track. Oh, here's how he did it. He hit it going in, went across the track like a billiard ball, and pounded the wall on the driver's left.
Boy, oh boy, that's so easy to do. You see, the car's unsettled before it becomes sighted onto the screen, so the thing's all out of control well before it hits the tire barriers.
This with 1 minute to go in the session. There you see, well, less than that. 15 seconds to go, and that will end the session, no doubt. There is Ralph. He appears to be all right. Quick wink to the crowd. Quick look at that left leg. That's the one that was injured at Saint-Devote here in Monaco last year. But as you can see, he, like David Coulthard, has gone in for some very high-tech and certainly very soft-looking knee pads. But the best news is he is all right. So the session ticks down to the final moments. The checkered flag will be out. And perhaps these teams haven't learned everything they would have liked to. There is the checkered flag. Here is a replay. One of the Saubers through the chicane. Here's Eddie Irvine in the Jaguar getting it sideways. Will he hit the wall? No, he will not. And down the hill comes Michael Schumacher in the Ferrari. Ooh, oh, that was close. Followed by Enrique Bernoldi in one of the arrows. Right there at the Nouvelle Chicane, one of the few spots on the racetrack here at Monaco where there is room to get around someone. We'll be back in just a moment. Back in Monte-Carlo, Monaco. Earlier we mentioned that the drivers are allowed to practice their starts on the racetrack. There goes Michael Schumacher, Eddie Irvine, and Enrique Bernoldi doing exactly that. And you notice that Bernoldi's car does not have that bizarre front wing that Verstappen's did. More on that in a moment. Here's a look at the Thursday afternoon practice times. Mika Hakkinen leads Michael Schumacher, followed by Ralf Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello. John Alesi up in 8th spot. Jacques Villeneuve 9th. outperforming his teammate Olivier Panis, although it bears repeating once again, Steve, that this was purely a practice session, and the engineers and drivers are about to go to work.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very important to collect as much data, and it's very difficult to say that the times are that meaningful, certainly at the start of the session. Towards the end of the session, you get accurate qualifying results, I guess.
And after a close look at those wings on Trulli and Verstappen's cars, that device has been banned for the weekend. Be sure to join us on Saturday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time for live coverage of qualifying from Monaco. And, of course, the race begins at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. We'll see you then. I'm Bob Barsha for Steve Matchett. Thanks for being with us. See you at qualifying for Monaco.